Welcome to CC Writes. My name is CC Lefty, and today the magic is in you. Magic in stories is complicated, or it's terribly simple, or maybe it's something in between. We have so many systems for magic in literature with so many requirements that many authors hold fast to the idea that magic in literature must have set and determined rules to follow. But is that really a requirement? Or are we yet again writing ourselves into a corner for the sake of rules that were meant to be broken? Let's find out. Writing magic can be complicated enough without forcing other writers to adhere to plotting practices that may not benefit them or their story. Imagine if someone told Tolkien that he had to adhere to the same rules of magic established in Harry Potter. Seriously, imagine it. It would be awful. Different worlds and different authors tend to form unique styles of magic that work for a specific purpose. One person's idea of how to write magic simply isn't going to work for another author and their world. Rather than use magic systems as a way to police each other's writing, we should be studying the ways that other writers use magic in their stories to inspire our own unique magic systems. And if my series about writing prose is any indicator, I am all about studying other people's writing. The startling truth is that while some excellent works of literature use very scientific and rule-based systems of magic, other excellent books use systems of magic that are completely undefined. I want to take a look at both of these types of magic systems to prove once and for all that structured magic is not necessarily superior magic. I'm going to look at 4 different pieces of writing with examples of both structured and unstructured magic. We're going to look at the magic systems of Terry Pratchett, J.K. Rowling, Tamara Pierce, and J.R.R. Tolkien. Terry Pratchett's Discworld is based on what's called a Vancian magic, a type of magic structure pioneered by author Jack Vance and used in the game Dungeons & Dragons. Vancian magic structures use rituals and prepared incantations with a limited amount of space available for multiple spells. Practitioners have to decide on which spells they'll use ahead of time because it takes time and effort to memorize spells. Pratchett's concept of magic in Discworld is that magic is basically the science of that world. It's dangerous to use, and the people who use it don't have a perfect understanding of why it works. It just does. And if you think that's a cop-out, then please explain to me how the magic slate in your pocket can allow you to communicate with somebody on the other side of the world and access all human knowledge with the swipe of a finger. I'll wait. Actually, I won't wait. I have more points to make. J.K. Rowling's world of Harry Potter is significantly less structured, but does have some rules to guide how magic is used. Spells are taught and memorized. Incantations are used most of the time, but it is possible to use magic spells without incantations with enough practice and focus. Wands, magic items, and potions must be used to perform spells most of the time. People can use magic without wands, as evidenced by the fact that Harry had magical phenomena occur in his life before he knew he was a wizard. Mostly, wands give magic structure within the world of Harry Potter. Magic can be used indefinitely without tiring out the wizard and with no limit to the number of spells that can be cast other than the limit of the wizard's memory, which in some cases is not that great. The wizarding world of Harry Potter has some rules, but very few limits for the wizards that reside within it. The structure is pretty simple compared to the intense rituals and memorization that exists within Terry Pratchett's world. But J.K. Rowling follows her own rules pretty closely. You won't see many wizards casting spells without incantations or wands to focus their magic. Tamara Pierce also created a system of magic in her series of stories set in the Kingdom of Tortall. She establishes the idea that people have different levels of innate magic and that magic must be trained. Training typically includes learning about the world and meditating to practice accessing magic. There are spells that people learn, but rarely incantations that are said out loud. Occasionally, ingredients and mediums are used to complete a spell or focus the magic, but not always. A lot of time, magic is shaped purely by the will of the magician or sorcerer wielding it. Kind of like the Green Lantern, but not the one with Ryan Reynolds. That one never happened. There's not a lot of structure to how magic is used in Tortall, but there is a limit based on how much innate magic is available to its user. The sorcerers in the story get tired out by using their magic. People with a great deal of innate magic that have practiced and studied can use more spells and more powerful spells. People with a small amount of innate magic can use a few small charms. Pierce's magic in this world is largely unstructured, with only enough detail to give the impression there are rules, but the greatest rule is human stubbornness. In Lord of the Rings, magic is not magic, but is magic if you would consider it magic. That is to say, there's a lot of magic and a lot of intrinsic qualities to things that are magical in nature, but these things are natural to the world of Middle-earth and wouldn't necessarily be considered magic by the people who live there. Magic doesn't have any real limits, although there are some magics that are considered more powerful than others and some practitioners that are more powerful than others. It's a thing that's a thing that isn't a thing except for when it's a thing. Simple as pie. Basically, the magic in Lord of the Rings is an example of unstructured magic. Magic in Tolkien's world takes the shape of the shape it takes when it takes it. Yeah, confusing, I know, but also really beautiful. I consider the magic of Lord of the Rings to be true magic, a kind of magic that defies logic and reason. It goes beyond the physical and into the spiritual and the divine, and this type of magic is okay too. These are 4 great works of literature, and they show that magic can be structured or completely unstructured, and the writing and story won't suffer one bit. For us writers, that means we can literally write any kind of magic that we want. There's no reason for us to police each other's work and cry foul if somebody doesn't set specific limits on their magic system. So, calm your roll. It doesn't matter if my magic is a little wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey. We really shouldn't be giving hard and fast rules for every aspect of writing. As much as I love to prove that anybody can write well if you learn the underlying structure of writing and prose, those rules are meant for beginners who need a solid understanding of the basics of writing a story. Once you master how a good story is formed, the rules of writing become something more like a suggestion. Writing is an art, after all, and great art breaks the rules. But there's a problem. Just because you can write your magic without structure doesn't mean you should write your magic without structure. I'm sorry, I know this seems to fly in the face of my point that we don't need to plan out every aspect of our magic, but it is unfortunately true. I've said it before, I will say it a million times in the future, and I am saying it right now. Intent is everything. This is the one writing rule that I will not bend or break. You need to write your stories with intent, which means in this case, you need to choose the magic in your stories with intent. Does magic take a front seat in your story? Are your characters more magical or more spiritual in nature? What is the purpose of including magic in your story? You have to know why you're including magic and to what purpose you're including it. Each of the stories I highlighted before use magic in very specific ways. Discworld was written for adults and utilized the idea that magic is basically science. In order for people to use science, we have to perform very specific tasks to make it work. We have to create objects that do the work for us. And we can only remember so much information at a time. For Discworld, highly structured Vancian magic was a good choice. Harry Potter was written for children, so highly structured magic would not have been a good choice. The audience needed a magic system that they could follow, so funny words, magic wands, and no limit on what's possible was the correct decision. Tamara Pierce writes stories about people and their struggles, so her magic couldn't be infinite. It had to be something that her characters struggled to use and that couldn't solve all of their problems for them. Therefore, she gave her magic the limit of human will and personal ability. For her stories, that worked perfectly. Tolkien wrote a story where the spiritual realm was equally important to the physical realm. His magic was innate in the creatures that inhabited the realm, innate in the world itself, and used equally by both good and evil forces. His story was about the supernatural, things that go beyond our understanding or practice of logic. Therefore, his magic took the same shape as that of the supernatural and the divine. For his specific story, this was the best type of magic to use. So when you're writing magic, you need to write it with intent. Don't concern yourself with the guidelines that other writers place on magic. You don't have to write an entire textbook on how magic works in your world. You do have to understand what your world is like and what your story is about before you make a decision about how much or how little structure your story requires. Ignore the magic police and figure out what will make your story the best it can be. You are the only person who can make that decision. If you'd like to see more writing advice from me, check out the video on top where I tell you how cell phone novels will improve your writing. Otherwise, click on the bottom video to see what YouTube recommends. As always, thank you so much for joining me today on CC Writes. I hope you enjoyed our time together, and I will see you later.